Hey folks, Dr. Mike Israetel here for Renaissance Periodization. New series begins today. Fitness myths. There are many of them, possibly infinity, but we're going to take all of them down, starting with this week's video, fitness myth number 1. And by the way, if you have some ideas that you think might be myths, might not be myths, just throw them in the comments. And if you don't have any ideas of your own, but you scroll through and you upvote some of the ones you really want me to talk about, I'll put them in the deck and we will end up chatting about them and making sure that we sort right from wrong. Fitness myths number 1, inaugural episode for today, is that you must cut carbs to lose fat. I'm sure you've heard that before. As usual, and especially in this new series, we're going to take a very particular structure. We're going to talk about the claim itself and really kind of break down what is the claim that's supposedly mythical. We'll talk about why it's probably wrong, or at least the big downsides of it. Then we'll talk about some grains of truth, because almost every myth has a grain of truth. Like even flat Earth. What's the grain of truth? When you walk outside, you know what I'm saying? It looks pretty flat, right? So every myth has a grain of truth, and it's important to admit that, because a lot of times when you're talking to folks in the real world and they say, well, you got to cut carbs to lose fat, you can start the conversation with, hey, listen, I hear you. There's some good stuff going on here. And they go, see, you agree. And you go, but what about this? And they go, oh, maybe I will actually change my mind. Versus if you just tell them they're wrong, just tell them they're stupid, you might get punched in the face instead of convince anyone of anything. And then lastly, after grains of truth, we'll talk about summing it all up and what are the actual best practices in this regard. So if there's a myth about range of motion, I won't end it with like, this is wrong, and here's why, and here's some true stuff about it. I'll end it with, but here's what you take away. What do you actually do in the gym with your own range of motion? So we can, not just crap on things, but actually learn stuff, which I think is most of the point of this channel, outside of my absolutely terrible attempts to do comedy. All right, so the claim is essentially that when you diet for fat loss, if you start a fat loss diet, in many circles and to many people, the first move is you cut your carbs. Everyone does it, okay, seemingly, quote unquote, everyone. Lots of people do it. You read about it all the time. You hear about it. You're like, hey, Jim, how's Monday treating you? I don't know. I cut my carbs doing a fat loss diet. And you're like, oh, it makes sense, buddy. You're hanging in there. Carbs are the enemy. And it's just something you kind of do. It's almost like implied. So if I ever tell anyone I'm sitting on a plane or on a bus or on a beach with lots of people coming up to talk to me, the beach doesn't actually make any sense. If I'm around other folks and I start just chatting with them and I mention that I'm dieting, or they'll say like, oh, I see you're eating XYZ, they'll oftentimes, very often say things like, so it's carbs, right? You got to cut the carbs. It's just something that's almost in our fitness culture, super embedded. And it's backed up by some forms of reasoning. Reasoning is a real stretch. Thomas Sowell is rolling around right now hearing me say this. There's a notion, okay, that carbs are somehow uniquely adapogenic, which means they have a unique ability, more than other nutrients, being protein and fat, to cause fat gain. Like a lot of times you could be eating gobs of butter, physical animal fat, and some keto folks would be like, I see you're stoking that fat burning fire. Like, yeah, with fat, what? And then you have like one apple and they're like, I see you trying to put that into your system. You're going to get obese. And you're like, interesting. So a lot of there is a claim that carbs are uniquely adapogenic, the unique ability to store fat. And okay, so those are the claims. Let's see how far they go. Well, turns out not very far. Fundamentally, the only thing you need to lose fat is a calorie deficit. That is the core of what you need. And to create that deficit, usually you increase activity. You can, good idea, but you almost always cut some nutrients out. Which nutrients you cut matters a lot less for fat loss and for sure for weight loss than, than if you cut the nutrients at all. So if you're cutting 400 calories out and it comes from either all carbs or all fats or all proteins, a lot of the weight loss is similar. There are some differences though in the body composition that will result. So when you create that deficit, it can come from carbs, it can come from fats, it can even come from proteins. Probably if you're interested in losing muscle, so not a good idea for most of you folks watching this channel. And it can, of course, come from a combination of any two or even all three. Now, here's the deal. Most people can benefit from cutting those carbs as little as possible or not at all. Why? Because if we cut carbs, we cut a major fuel source for hard workouts, a major fuel source for recovery, and a major macronutrient that promotes anti-catabolism, which is also known as sparing muscle loss, okay? So carbs literally give you a ton of energy to train, lots of ability to recover. They actually even promote deep sleep, and they give you this weapon against muscle loss. The thing is, past a certain point, fats don't really do all that stuff nearly as well or not at all. So the result is most people are eating a fine amount of protein, probably too little, but let's say they're fine on the protein. And the reason they need a deficit to lose weight is because they're eating too many carbs and too many fats in some combination. If you take their fats and cut them down to just what their body needs to function normally, a lot of times that opens up this huge, huge window of caloric deficit, and now you're burning fat like crazy, even though you didn't touch your carbs at all, and there's kind of really no downside. So to put it another way, a lot of people can just cut their fats and generate a really robust deficit that powers fat loss for weeks and weeks and weeks without ever touching carbs, and thus impinging on any hormones or performance like carb cutting would. Because carb cutting comes with some serious downsides. Fat cutting to a point, which I'll get to what that point is in a sec, comes with downsides that you might not want. So, grains of truth. Yes, you can cut your carbs up front and leave your fats, or even cut your carbs a ton and increase your fats. You can do those things. As long as you generate a deficit, the diet is going to work quite well. That's not to say optimally, but it will work, especially to lose weight, right? Definitely works for fat loss, definitely works for weight loss, and it has some other benefits. A lot of folks, but not all, and maybe not even the majority, just lots of people in the world, get a pretty cool anti-hunger effect when they really drop their carbs, keep their fats and proteins high. They just generally don't tend to get as hungry as they normally would if they have the same number of calories, but more carbs and fewer fats. If you are one of those people, and you never know until you experiment a bunch with different approaches, and if hunger is a really big deal to you, you can absolutely do that and absolutely will work, no big deal. And the other grain of truth, the last or a third grain of truth here, is that a lot of times when your calories have to come down substantially, like towards the end of a fat loss phase when your body's really stubborn and you're really tired, it's not carbs versus fat. It's like you get down to the very low fats. You can't cut fats anymore without real unfortunate consequences for your muscularity, your performance, etc. And then you have to cut the carbs. So a lot of folks cut carbs because for them, that deficit needs to be big enough where it's not an either or, it's like both. You know, it's like, I'm going to fight zombies. Do I need a gun or a knife? Like, yes, the answer is yes. Preferably a gun that shoots knives. I may be onto something. Comment below if you want to be in on my zombie destruction technology project. What am I even saying? All right. Taking all this together, what are the best practices? What can we leave the table with? So here's the deal. When you need to create a deficit, my recommendation is to cut the excess fats first. What's excess? Anything above roughly like, 0.3 grams per pound per day. So if you weigh 200 pounds, then 60 grams of fat is good enough to like check all the boxes for hormonal activity and so on and so forth and general health. And really, you know, if you're eating 150 grams of fats daily and you cut to 60 grams of fats, you're going to see almost no downsides in anything except a ton of calories are opened up to create a fat burning deficit. So that would probably be my first move. Now, in addition to that, it's okay to go super low fats, like close to 0 grams of fat per day for like 3 to 4 weeks at the end of a fat loss phase. Now, this is just if you need to really lose weight to make some weight class or something, or you really just need to get peeled for a bodybuilding show. And even in those cases, maybe 10% of the time you do this. It's extreme. What I'm here to tell you is it's okay, but it's rarely used and almost never necessary, but it can be done. This means that generally, because you prefer fat cutting, you only cut carbs when fat cutting is no longer an option. So if you have a lot of dieting left over and you're already down to 60 grams of fat at 200 pounds and you're not losing weight as fast as you need to, it's time to cut some carbs, right? That's just it's just what's going on, you know. And if you're at the end of the last few weeks and you've tried to cut your fats before to the very low numbers and you just feel like total crap, it's time to cut carbs, all right? Fact of the matter, it's way better than cutting fats to 0 if by experience you've learned that cutting fats to close to 0 just destroys everything about you, which it can very well do, right? It's not unhealthy unless you do it for months and years, but it's also almost impossible. But it's something that, cutting another 50 grams of carbs might be way better than cutting another 20 grams of fat or something like that. Now, here's the big kicker. For regular folks that you might be helping out with their fitness, I know a lot of you folks watch this channel are personal trainers, just like nice people that know stuff, and people come up to you in the gym because you're more jacked than average, and they're like, do I eat carbs, or am I going to be evil if I do? You can steer them by telling them a couple things. A lot of people, what they need to do in order to lose a lot of fat and weight is to clean up their diet. And I know it's a stupid colloquial term, but what it basically means is getting rid of excess sugary carbs and excess fats. Now, the thing is, when you get rid of foods that are high in fat, you won't get rid of almost all excess sugary carb foods. Ice cream, I know, this is going to be a painful list. Donuts, pizza, burgers, pasta, but I like Italian style with all the fucking oil, everything. We don't make pasta in Philly. Oh, marron, the fucking best. Like that kind of pasta where there's like a fucking stick of butter sticking out the motherfucker. That kind of food, potato chips, fries, I could keep going. Milkshakes, I could keep going. All that kind of food brings in tons of carbs, yes, but most regular people, it's plenty of carbs is fine. It's not the carbs. It's the fat that brings in that really jacks up the calories of those foods. So if you take these foods and reduce them or eliminate them for a while for a diet, you end up reducing fat like crazy. So for example, if someone's at home and they're like, can I still have pasta? Like they're talking to you between sets in the Power Act. Like, so I want to lose fat. Like, is pasta okay? You're like, yes, but get some turkey, ground turkey, instead of like full fat ground beef. Don't make the shit in butter. Make sure you get a nonstick pan, squirt a little bit of that Pam nonstick spray, and then fry it up like that. And they're like, all right, that's pasta, but it doesn't taste as good. Like, yes, I know, but it sans 400 calories per meal of fats, which is a really good thing. And the thing is, you can tell someone to cut carbs, and mostly carbs, and all of a sudden, almost every food they wanted to eat is fucking gone. And the low-carb versions of foods are usually awful and terrible, so it really restricts their menu. But if you get folks to just eat less junk food and put less added fats into their food, leaner meats, so on and so forth, no excess oils, all of a sudden they can still have the food's a little drier for sure. It's not as great, but it's still super healthy. It's still really filling, and they get this crazy amount of calorie deficit generated without feeling like they're starving to death. So that's probably my best recommendation. You get regular folks interested, try to get them to eat leaner versions of foods, and all of a sudden they're like, holy crap, I'm losing weight really fast. Like, yeah, it's interesting. When I'm on my way up in a mass phase, it's really tempting to really skyrocket the fats. That would gain me a lot of fat, of course, because it's so hard to eat a lot of lean food. It keeps you full, and there's just not that many calories. I have to get to 4,500 calories eating rice and pasta and shit. I'm like, fuck, can't I just have like 5 slices of cheesecake? That'll get me there just fine. The answer is no, is that's all fat gain. But if you reverse that process and say, like, I've been having a couple slices of cheesecake every day, some ice cream, pizza, this and that, if you just take those foods and make them the lean versions, which is to say eliminating most of them, you still eat a ton of really awesome food, and you're like, yeah, I would like a piece of cheesecake, but I'm losing 2 pounds of fat per week. This is really awesome, right? So that's my best recommendation. Take out all the added oils and stuff like that. It's a real good start for people losing fat, and for many of them, that actually is all you need. Some folks absolutely will do better with lower carbs and higher fats. And for them, by experiment, by trial and error, you can say, hey, listen, I believe you. If it's going well for you, do it. It just sucks to see people like, yeah, man, for me, fucking lowering the carbs is what it takes. And they weigh like 380. And you're like, takes to go where? And like, it's not like they used to be 600. They're like, yeah, I mean, I can still eat a lot of bacon. You're like, yes. The problem is you're still eating too much, right? So at the end of the day, if it works, it's got to be some meat behind it. They have to have been like, hey, I cut my carbs before and I lost 50 pounds. And then it's a matter of them re-entering a diet that we'll talk about in later videos. And we have a bunch of videos on this. But, if it works, it has to have some evidence of working, not just a notion. You want to try a notion, that's fine. You could crap away several weeks of a diet trying a notion that doesn't work. In any case, keep an open mind. Yes, carbs are better than fats on average for bodybuilding, hypertrophy, muscle retention purposes, but there's a balancing act there, and it's up to you to find what works best for you by trial and error. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week with another myth. Hopefully it's not your favorite idea ever, because I'm going to crush it. That's my best Arnold impression. That's all you get for now. See you later.